Just a small disclaimer, this is a joke, I'm not into bestiality, and if you are, get back to your jail cell, you! Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Scarring Myself for Life. It would appear that I have been fortunate enough to gain 200 subscribers, and today I plan on losing every last one of you by reading you a book that I heard about on TikTok from the lovely Write Thyself, otherwise known as Jasmine. Jasmine's video popped up on my For You page, and I'm quite concerned because I'm not sure what this says about me, but it detailed a love story. Nay, a forbidden love story. I'm absolutely horrified, but I needed to know more. My intrusive thoughts got the better of me, and it got me thinking, surely fucking not, a dinosaur shagging a woman? No. No! So for my 200 subscriber special, I am going to be reading you Wet Hot Allosaurus Summer by Lola Forst. She was a country girl looking for excitement. He was an apex predator theropod. Joy. Chapter 1. Tanis climbed onto the biggest barn to watch the dinosaurs. Her whole body hurt from a grueling day of ranching. There was dirt under her chipped nails and a big brown stain on her blue jeans from where she'd fallen in the mud while milking Dusty, her favourite heifer. In the fields, the cows mooed contentedly, chewing clover. The evening was thick with pollen and the warm buzz of bees and chirping crickets. Tanis's body was tight and lean from 18 years of working alongside her father and brothers on their farm. Had she grown up in the city, around men who were not her family, she might have known she was beautiful. She'd inherited her mother's generous breasts and backside, but hard labour had crystallized her curves, making them more severe and striking. Though Tanis knew nothing of her own beauty, she knew of the beauty of the dinosaurs, whom she watched every night without fail. Astonishing, the neuter proclaimed. So many decades earlier, that they should live among us, recreated out of DNA from rocks. That was the existential shift, to think such a thing was possible. And yet, multinational conglomerates funded a bold dinosaurs to work experiment. It succeeded beyond their imagining, and thus, like so many other species, dinosaurs were at last belatedly domesticated, or so they thought, and had integrated into the workforce of man. Tanis had grown up on these histories, and they seemed like myths to her. She couldn't imagine a time before dinosaurs were everywhere, a time when people protested by bombing research centres and zoos. It seemed to her as stupid as shooting at cows. Her family lived in the foothills on some of the last remaining farmland in Alberta. From the roof of the biggest barn, she could watch the extractions, see the bodies of the pterodactyls, as perfectly engineered as aeroplanes, but of warm flesh. During the day, hordes of Tyrannosaurus and smaller carnivores were visible. Sometimes a raptor would scamper through their fields, scaring the cows. She sketched them in secret sometimes. Their long necks, the blues and greens. Learning how to draw their feathers was hard at first, but eventually became her favourite part. She loved how the scales and feathers worked together for heat maintenance and protection. When her father found her sketchbook, he slapped her across the face. "Those ugly lizards are going to dig our graves," he growled. Tanis learned to keep the sketchbook under her pillow, and when she slept, she carried it in her knapsack across the farm during the day. Each night she dreamed she'd wake up as a giant and beautiful dinosaur, and that she would flee her small life as a farm girl. Tanis closed the sketchbook and set it on the shingles. A clover-sweet breeze tugged strands of honey hair out of her ponytail. In this light, the dinosaurs were perfect. They shone deep amber and crimson. That colour made her heart rush. Every day, they seemed closer. At last it was dark, and Tanis felt cold and alone. Her body knew the barn. Every foothold and loose corner of siding, and she slid quickly down its face. The first thing she noticed when she landed was an unusual smell. A musky, earthy smell, she thought, but mixed with flowers and not unpleasant. Perhaps her mother was experimenting for dinner. Tanis heard a hiss and watched her cat Misty, a grey Persian, scatter into a hole in the barn. And then she saw the leg. It took Tanis a second to realise what she was looking at. The dark, iridescent feathers shone so many colours. She would never be able to render them, even if she spent her whole life drawing them. She followed the tree-thick leg up to its strong hips, wide chest, and finally the glorious saurian head, 8 feet above the barn floor. The word came unbidden into her mind. Allosaurus. She whispered it so softly she could barely hear herself. His eyes were the deep green of oceans she had only imagined in her dreams. His cheekbones looked carved from prehistoric cliffs. His feathered dew was coiffed in a sexy and hip honky-tonk curl. He let out a low, deep roar, like a tractor coming on after a long winter. His body reminded her of a living lake, the way one move would ripple across his feathers. He reached out. She saw his communication device. The wires wound into his claw. After some violent misunderstandings, all infant dinosaurs were hardwired with a bioelectric communication device that allowed them to speak telepathically with their human foreman, or companions, she thought with a heart stab of anticipation. She knew with one touch she would be able to see into his mind, and he would be able to see into hers. She backed away, fearful. Of what? She should have felt instinctive terror at the giant predator's presence, but it wasn't that at all. Was it something else? Was it fear of really communicating with him? Of knowing what he was thinking? Did he feel the same way? He stared into her with such a begging look. She let him touch her temple and felt the quick zing of their minds, tuning into the same channel. I've watched you too, Tanis, his mind said into her mind, and then he backed away. He was shy too. He stared down at his claw feet, language, thoughts. He was no animal. This was a sentient creature who could speak to her. Want her. Could he? Half afraid and half wanting. Tanis let him snip her neck. His mouth parted, and she saw his rows of razor teeth. His breath smelled hot and earthy, like a barbecue. She couldn't distinguish fear from desire. Goosebumps prickled over every inch of her soft human skin. He touched her temple again with his talon, and she watched his fantasy like a movie projected onto her skull. He didn't know whether to eat her or to and make her. His tongue slid out of his mouth and brushed her behind the ear with unexpected softness. The feeling bloomed all down her spine. Oh my god, I can't read that. She felt a He licked her again. This time down her entire neck, tasting her fear and sweat. His tongue was as big as her whole hand. She reached down and gently stroked the feathers of his chest, muscled from labour. His skin was hard like a leather saddle, but his feathers felt like tulip petals, soft and slightly wet. She began with her. Tanis, move! She heard her father shout from behind her. She saw him, short and stocky, a sickly human, with a pipe sticking out of the corner of his mouth, shotgun cocked. No! She shouted and leapt in front of the Allosaurus. The shot boomed through her eardrums and into her shoulder. It sent her flying through the air like a sack of flour. She landed on a hay bale, coughing, wind knocked out of her. The magic of the encounter was gone. She felt cold and shattered, blood gushing from her shoulder, soaking her flannel shirt. The pain had not yet arrived, but she knew that it would. The dinosaur hissed and wailed, lunging at her father. He was several times larger than the man. She sensed his hot fury. He was upon him in seconds, teeth out. "No!" Tanis shouted. The beast turned back, eyes narrowed at her. Though they were not connected by his telepathy device, Tanis could feel his thoughts. "Would you save him?" Tanis nodded sadly. As much as she hated her human life, she'd lived with her father for 18 years and felt some sympathy for him, his small life and hatred. The dinosaur forgot her cowering father and returned to her. He lifted her with his talons with a remarkable tenderness and held her to him. She smelt the scent that had first identified him, and it made her feel safe. She held on tight as he ran with her, springing on quick lizard legs out of their barn, across their property. All of the stars in the sky swirled as they ran together as one creature. Behind them, her father and brothers had assembled, all with shotguns firing, but Tanis and her mate were sprinting too quickly. The gunshots came nowhere near the fleeing couple. After an age of running, the blast grew quiet and impotent. She saw her brothers and father fade into even tinier specks. She thought her heart would burst as she curled into the warm and welcoming shoulder of her new love, the love she had observed unnoticed for so long. Was it shock or blood loss, or just dawning realization? Her old life was over. Finally, all the senseless noise from her farm had disappeared. It was dark. The dinosaur stopped running and set her down on the field. The cold air rushed around her. Pain burned in her shoulder. He touched her forehead. "What do I call you?" she asked. "We don't really have names," he said, "but you can call me Big Al." She repeated the name out loud and telepathically. Big Al. It was so beautiful to her, so simple. She couldn't believe she was here in the field with a dinosaur. Her dinosaur. Big Al. He rubbed his all over her again. Her skin perked up. She didn't know she could feel this way, like she was jumping into a freezing lake while being burned alive. Big Al popped her buttons easily with his talons. He like they were made of paper. Tanis had never been in front of a man before. Never mind a man dinosaur. She tried covering herself with her uninjured arm, but he That's disgusting, I'm not reading that. He traced her, circling her, which leapt up. They with a that was almost painful. Big Al continued down her body, her and he, her. With his strong jaw, he pushed apart her, he, her ardently, like she was the most in the entire world. Oh my god, that's disgusting. Everything about him was too much. Tanis could barely breathe. She saw colours, the bright reds and ambers of dinosaurs flying at twilight. I don't want to say that. Oh, I can't say that either. She had through the fields in her entire life. Her body knew what to do. Instinct took over. He wrapped his mouth around her injured shoulder, lapping at her blood as he... Tanis became lightheaded and blood loss. Big red tingling flowers bloomed through her entire body. What the fuck? Could she die? She wanted to know. From too much pleasure? She hadn't believed it was possible. Oh my god. Ew, that's fucking disgusting. Then when she thought it would never end, that they would stay like this forever. With one, she felt it was over. Big Al lay down in the field. She climbed up onto his chest and heard the deep pump of his heart, the braying of his breath. She knew she would love him for the rest of her life. He touched her temple again. "I'm so hungry," he communicated. "And I... His thoughts stuttered, hesitant. "Go on," whispered Tanis. "You can trust me." "I love the taste of your blood." His eyes went shy as he said that. She felt his vulnerability. She lifted herself up to a seated position and looked down at her body, at the wound her father had inflicted on her shoulder. Her arm dangled, dead and grey. There wasn't any use trying to save it. She knew what to do. She offered her injured arm to his hunger and felt the hot pain of his love as he devoured the whole thing. Wait a minute. So you with a big fat ass shotgun exploded wound to your shoulder did unspeakable things with a dinosaur, just one-armed. Just, oh yeah, we can worry about this later. Saving my arm? No. I'm too horny for that shit. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Chapter 2. Tanis woke up to the thin, grey light of dawn. Cool wind brushed her ears and cheeks. After deflowering her in the hayfield, Big Al had picked her up and carried her all night, pressed to his chest. When she asked where they were going, he had responded that he knew of a place just south of the Canadian border. A dinosaur-human love sanctuary where they could go and be safe. It sounded blissful to Tanis. She felt dizzy and lightheaded. Her mouth was dry as sand. She looked down at her shoulder. Big Al's feather bandage was holding. All her life, Tanis had grown up hearing the myth that dinosaur feathers had healing properties, but never had she imagined it to be true. The spot still ached, and she missed her left arm, but the bleeding had stopped and the wound didn't appear infected. Big Al sprinted powerfully through the fields. Tanis felt small and in awe of him. When he ran, his lips curled back, and the rising sun glinted a soft orange off his incisors. She had never respected or adored another being so much. The long grass shone in the early light, silos cast long shadows. Tanis counted the cows they passed and started. Was that supposed to be stared? Is that a typo? And started into their big trusting eyes? Anyway, they were the only things she knew she would miss from her old farm life. As they travelled, Big Al occasionally reached over and touched Tanis's cheek to tell her stories of his life. He grew up in a dinosaur nursery in Colorado. He and his 307 siblings roved the Rocky Mountains, learning to hunt deer and fish in rivers. He studied to be an electrical engineer and moved north because the tar sands offered him the best salary. He would have rather worked dinosaur-human communications technology, but the money wasn't there. Well, for the first time ever, Tanis felt truly alive in her body. Everything excited her. The breeze, the smell of Al, the buttery sunshine. She felt renewed, baptized in sexual awareness. Big Al's deep panting from running made her. Halfway through the morning, she couldn't stand it anymore. She wriggled free of his arms and shimmied down his body. She dangled down with her ankles around his neck, her body along his. Why do they keep calling his bits his sex? This is one of the weirdest parts of this book. His sparkling in the prairie sun. Al growled. Nervously, Al stopped running. His her she the dinosaur she her him her him he her. So she was and his her he her his her, like an electric rod. Her they. Disgusting. That's disgusting. Big Al stopped her and touched her to say. He let go of her legs and she slowed down his body, landing face first into the earth. It took them 2 days of running, interrupted only by Tanis's desire and the need for food and to sleep, to arrive at the sanctuary. It wasn't what she expected. Instead of herds of dinosaurs and humans in various housing arrangements, she saw only one circular building in the middle of nowhere, a large log structure with many windows. An extensive vegetable garden bloomed and overflowed down one side of it. A few fields away, Big Al set Tanis down and they walked the rest of the way, side by side. A few meters away from the sanctuary, Tanis caught sight of a figure running towards them, a female redhead in a simple brown dress. She was smiling brightly. Al left Tanis's side unexpectedly. He ran towards the girl and lifted her into his arms. Tanis stopped walking. Al swung the woman round several times before setting her onto the ground. Tanis was about to start walking towards the couple again when, unexpectedly, Al, the woman, lifted her and ran with her into the nearby bushes. T? Tanis couldn't breathe. What was she doing hundreds of miles from home? From all she knew? Her love? Did she even know who he was? He had run off in the arms of a redhead. Tanis thought about the other woman. She was beautiful, tall and full-figured. Tanis's own seemed tiny by comparison. Through tears, Tanis saw another figure walking towards her, a woman with long black hair streaming down her shoulders. She was barefoot and wearing the same simple brown dress as the redhead. "My darling, don't worry," she said when she was a few feet away. "It happens to all of us this way." The woman's voice was soft and breathy. Tanis didn't know what to say. Who was this woman? "It doesn't mean he doesn't love you," she said. "It's just that love means something different here. Something more. And better." She took Tanis's hand and led her towards the log building. Tanis was so disorientated from what she'd seen. What had she seen? That she didn't completely register what was happening to her. She was only vaguely aware of the buzz of bees and earthy floral scent rising from the garden. She entered the building through the tall cedar doors. Whatever this place was, it was her home now. And there's a nice picture of some dinosaurs, and that is the end of the story.
Now, for a split second I thought, maybe I'm being too harsh here, and I shouldn't knock something until I try it, so I decided to go on a date with an Allosaurus of my own and see what all the fuss was about. He bought me flowers, we exchanged pleasantries, and then he told me all his favourite derogatory slurs for herbivores, so I decided to end the date there and say we should just be friends.
That was an experience I feel like I didn't need to have, and I'm not sure why I put myself through it. I am trying to think if I know anyone that has a birthday coming up soon, or someone that I hate that I can send this to for Christmas. In conclusion, your curiosity should stop at the TikTok. You don't need to go through it. I've read it, so you don't have to. Don't read it. Don't. You don't. It's not good. It's a mistake. Thanks for 200 subscribers. But at what cost? Anyway, bye! His feather. No! This is not a real book! Shut the fuck up. Did he feel the same way? What way? What way is he meant to be reciprocating? He stared down at his claw feet. Fuck off. Want her? Could he? No. Go see your therapist. All of the stars in the sky swirled as they ran together as one creature. What in the blissful twilight fuck? We don't really have names, he said. But you can call me Big Al. In front of a man before. Never mind a diamond. Shut up! The bright reds and ambers of dinosaurs flying at twilight. That's blood, girl. That is blood.